Welcome. You're listening to something different. This is not a history lesson, neither a fight recap. This is a space for honest talk about what's left of traditional martial arts in a world that is changing fast. The culture is changing, society is changing, and Budo is not an exception. What once felt timeless is now questioned. Here, we talk to those still walking the path to see what remains and what might already be lost. This project isn't about the numbers, but if you think these conversations matter, give us a like, subscribe, and share the content with other people who you think might be interested. This will help us to create a bigger community of people interested in Budo and what really it's about. Thanks.
If things are stagnant, then they do die. Evolution in the martial arts has always been a thing. You can't train MMA or BJJ with that intensity until you're 60 or 70. You simply can't do it. So the prices are just crazy. So to be able to have a full-time dojo, which I now have, it's quite a challenge. And I've seen the evolution of those places now in Singapore, where if you don't get, these places are charging $400 or $500 a month. You don't need a gi. They give you a gi. You have a shower. There's beautiful soaps. It's like this beautiful country club. Sport is fantastic, but sport is not Budo. And there's a big, big difference. It's part of your life. It permeates everything. These are timeless things that we need to preserve, but we have to look at different ways of presenting it to the student. So I see some dojos outside Japan that are more strict and Japanese than in Japan. And I think that what we need to realize is that the dojo is not a throne for the teacher to sit at and pontificate from or follow me like a guru.
This is Budo Is Dead, a podcast by Yoshin Project, hosted by Carlos Tama.
Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, someone I've had the privilege to train with, and one of my favorite people to share the mats with. Not because I take his uke too often, but because of his spirit and dedication. He's also a very good friend of mine, but that's not the only reason why he's here. Jon Marshall Sensei is 6th Dan in Yoshinkan Aikido and 6th Dan in Gyokushin Ryu Aikido. He trained in Japan through the rigorous Senshusei course at the Honbu Dojo of Yoshinkan. And later, he became a teacher both for Senshusei course and the international classes. Today, he owns dojos in Melbourne, Australia, and Singapore. And also, he runs a very big osteopathy clinic. But actually, what makes him especially interesting is, while he has walked the traditional path, he also embraces modern combat systems. He moves between the two worlds, the old and the new. So, Jon Sensei, welcome to Budo Is Dead.
Thank you, Carlos. It's an absolute privilege and honor, as always, to spend any time with you, and it's a great privilege.
All right, Sensei. Thank you very much. Let's jump into it. I have different questions for you. Like I said, this is a conversation, open conversation, and let's keep it like all those conversations we had in the past. So let's start from the beginning. You train in Japan.
Yes.
You have been training. You still go to Japan for your training. But I would like to know, you trained there, you taught in the Yoshinkan Honbu. What was your experience training there and teaching there, and then becoming an instructor in the Honbu Dojo?
So I was very lucky. Every instructor, kind of past and present, probably says that they belong to the golden age. But in my case, we were particularly lucky because I arrived in April 1996, and that was the same month that Inoue Sensei came back from teaching the police and became the second kancho, or the headmaster of the Yoshinkan Honbu Dojo. So he was the top of the dojo. Then Chida Sensei was the dojo cho, so he was the Shuseki Shihan, or top of the Shihan, and then there was all these amazing teachers under him. So I started Aikido back in 1985 at the Aikido Shihan with Joe Thambu Shihan. So I was 10 years old, and I was a Nidan when I got to Japan, and I thought I knew how to fall. I thought I knew how to do Aikido, but it was a very humbling experience in a great way, because I was a very, how should I say, small fish in a big pond when I got to Japan. And when you sat down and looked to the right of you, where all the teachers lined up, there were eighth dan, seventh dan, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, all the way down, as you know. So it was just an amazing vibe at the time. The spirit there, the atmosphere was electrifying, and I think there was no part short due to Inoue Sensei, who brought that kind of renewed spirit. I never trained at the Kogonai Dojo, where Takano Sensei was the chief instructor, and I heard that was very tough, and it was very like kind of a kidotai, or the right police style of training. I was started my journey, and I've only known the Ochiai Dojo, but when I was there, it was extremely strong. Technically, I think it was one of the very strong time. Inoue Sensei had come back and reformed quite a few ideas, and we were kind of lucky to be part of it. So I was there from 1996 to 2003. I came for a year, and I didn't do the Senshusei course or the instructor's course. I thought, yeah, I know how to fall. I know how to do this, it had nothing to offer me. But when I saw the level of the students and how quickly they developed in that 11-month, that 1 year period, basically, I was like, I got no excuses. I'm 22 years of age, and it's something I thought for me was a stepping stone to becoming an instructor. Actually, at that time I didn't plan on becoming an instructor. It was a place where I could train, 4 or 5 hours a day. And as a young man, I think or as a young person, that's really, really important. So after the Senshusei course, I actually went to study acupuncture in Ochanomizu. So there was a famous, the Beijing University had a branch in Ochanomizu. So I was very interested in acupuncture and kind of manual medicine. And that kind of laid the foundation of my career afterwards. So I did 2 years of that. And then Darren Sensei, who was the head of the foreign staff of the Kokusai Bu, he asked me whether I'd be interested in assisting, which was, as you know, is a huge honor, because usually to do that, you have to be a Senshusei and then do Seiwanin for another year. But he allowed me to join the Kokusai, or the international staff. And that really was where I learned, I guess, how to teach, and learn how to, by the example of my seniors, to be able to pass on what I learned to the English speaking class and the Senshusei. So, I could talk about the whole podcast just about that, but I think that was very formative years for me to learn it, to develop my Aikido, and that intensity was really important in my forging of my path.
All right. Obviously, by now I think many people know what the Senshusei course is, but could you explain just briefly what is it for those listeners and viewers that don't practice Yoshinkan and they don't know exactly what the Senshusei course is?
So the Senshusei course was meant to be translated as a special student, but what it really was a program to develop international instructors to teach Yoshinkan Aikido in their countries or overseas. So the idea was to have an intensive year of training. And when I say intensive, it's Tuesday to Saturday, 8:30 till 2 p.m. So we train for about 4 hours a day. But basically, regardless of your rank, you go back to white belt. So there's a few reasons for this, but it's basically you are the bottom of the bottom and you need to work yourself up. For humility, and we will talk about some of the traits and character building that Budo gives us, this is a very necessary thing, because you are expected to clean the dojo. If you're late, you need to sit in seiza for 1 hour watching the class. It was very, very strict. It developed, the goal of it was to develop strong Aikido over a year. So you would go from white belt to black belt in a year. Now, for people listening to this sounds like, you can't be a black belt in 1 year, but you have to remember that training 20 hours a week really fast tracks you. And again, Shodan in Japan is only beginner step. It's the first step. It's not a high level of mastery. It is just basically you've mastered the basics. You're a serious student, and now you're ready for your journey. So it's still going. It began as a branch of the kidotai, or the police training. So that started back in the late 50s, I believe. And they would train the Senshusei would train alongside the police for an hour and a half a day. And then we would have our own program, and they would have their own program. So
that's the anti-riot police.
the anti-riot police, yeah. So they were sent. They had to be a minimum of a sandan in either judo or kendo. So it was more as they were already elite kind of budoka or practitioners, and this was an opportunity to further their career by doing this special kirotai course. And so, we got to train with them and, develop friendships with the police. There's some people that said that they were on salary and they did it easy, but, regardless of that, like there was no free passes given in that in either course. So you trained up, you turned up, you trained hard, and that was it. There was nothing special about it. Basically, after you finished the year, you got an instructor's license, and some people would go back to their countries. And most people stayed on, and I was lucky enough to stay on, which I thought was important because those lessons that we learned, I'm still digesting them. I think 28 years later. So yeah, it was a very special time.
So it's very interesting. You're now talking about teaching, and I wanted to talk to you about. So you started in Australia, then you moved to Japan, then you started teaching in Japan, moved back to Australia. Now you're in Singapore. So you've been teaching in three different countries, three different countries with totally different cultures.
Yes.
Very different approaches of not just teaching, but different approaches of how people learn, how people receive information, how people receive martial arts in general. So how's your teaching, your approach to teaching has changed due to these different cultural nuances?
Yeah, I was very lucky because I was assisting Joe Thambu Sensei back when I was a child. So from 12 or 13, I was an assistant instructor in his class, in his kids' class. So I would help him. And, I couldn't get enough of the dojo, like if I had done something wrong or bad, then I was banned from going to the dojo. Whereas, it was a punishment. I would be grounded and I wasn't allowed to go to the dojo because it was such a special place for me. But I guess to answer your question, so I was exposed very on to fantastic teachers and learning how they learning how they teach was really, really important. Thambu Sensei is an amazing ability of how to break down information and present it, and especially to large groups. He teaches seminars all around the world, and it's their first class. He's an amazing someone to really emulate. When I got to Japan, I was really, we had different teachers, as you know. Some teachers didn't say a word; they would just count. Some teachers would have you in seiza for 10 minutes and explain different things. But I really was influenced a lot by Ito Kenji Sensei. And what I really liked about Ito Sensei was he would explain things. We call it in coaching or like personal training or strength and conditioning, we call it chunking information together. So rather like you do the technique, you give the student the big picture. This is what we're doing. We're doing this technique, for example, Rotimuchi Tenshinage, which is a technique in Aikido. He would then show the technique and then we would all work just on the footwork. So he would stand in front of the mirror, we would copy him. So not knowing the language initially didn't really matter because Budo is learning by, people learn differently. People absorb information by, obviously, they intellectualize it. I'm more of a visual and kinesthetic learner, so I need to be hands-on. And most people are hands-on as well as visual learners, I think. So for martial arts, you don't need to talk so much, but I think getting the students to move and really keep them engaged was something he was a master at. So he would do the footwork and then with a partner, okay, let's work on the hands, let's put them together. And then slowly, let's look at let's look how to fall. And it was really building something together. And then you got the final product. And it was very, very, I think a very intelligent way of teaching. And that was one of the greatest lessons I learned. And that's how I still teach now. Give them a big picture and then break it down into bite-sized pieces. We've all been to seminars where we're sitting in seiza and the teacher starts talking and there's a few jokes and laughing and we get distracted by various things. We don't need to talk so much. We need to give the student an opportunity to feel the movement and feel the technique with their own body. So and I guess being in Asia, it's kind of the same thing. So Singapore, I mean, everyone speaks English here, so I don't have a language barrier, but I think less is more. And you don't need to talk so much. I think if people can feel and see what you're doing, it's really a rapid way of them absorbing the technique.
All right. Now, as a teacher, obviously you are like a lifelong student, and
Of
you're a
course.
business owner also.
Mm.
What are currently your biggest challenges you face keeping a traditional dojo alive? You have your dojo in Singapore. It's a
Yeah.
traditional dojo. We'll speak later that it's not completely a traditional dojo.
No, we have a mix.
Um, yeah, but what are the challenges you have as a teacher, a student, and as the owner of this business?
Yeah, so I think it's a difficult. I've never been just a dojo owner, and I have like a lot of respect for people that can run a full-time martial arts school. For me, I wasn't interested in doing that. I love like Budo is my passion, and I love teaching. But I really like I'm an osteopath first and foremost, so I just need to that is my business. So I derive
The core.
the majority of my income from that.
Mm,
And then my dojo, luckily, I've just taken out a rent on a new place. After COVID, it was up and down, and you're in Dubai, so you know the prices are just crazy. So to be able to have a full time dojo, which I now have, is actually it's quite a challenge. Uh, I think with advertising, I think it's definitely word of mouth. To build a traditional dojo does take time, but I do see that there's a real need now, especially for children who are not. I think competition is great. Like for example, in judo, jiu-jitsu, my son up until recently was doing judo. I'm trying to not push him too hard as dad, but I think definitely children get a lot of benefit out of getting off their iPad. We both have kids, and people listening to that. It's a really difficult situation, and it's kind of uncharted territory for us
mm,
because we want to push them into physical activity, but we want to keep it interesting. So, from the kids' point of view, I want to make it a little more not just we're traditional, but we want them to have fun. We want them to build not just their body, which is super important as well, with strength and conditioning, which is a big part of our program, but also a sense of Budo isn't fighting. Budo is about learning about yourself and being a better person. And so we want to we have a theme like every month, like responsibility, honesty. So we really try and, it's like Kano Jigaro Sensei from Judo, whose goal was to really use Budo as education to really fulfill your own potential. And I think that's super, super important. And I really like that idea. And yeah, I'm doing my best to I started Budo when I was young, and it's helped me immensely in life. Not just on the mat, of course, that's great, but the lessons it teaches after, and the lessons are immeasurable and numerous. And I guess we'll talk about that before.
yeah.
But I guess the challenges I said that you asked about is keeping people. I think motivation is the wrong word. It's to find something in themselves that they see the value of what we're doing, and I think they do. We have a lot of competition. Obviously, BJJ, MMA in Singapore is huge. I arrived here 7 years ago, and it was there were big schools, but now I see them everywhere. And Muay Thai, yeah, Muay Thai is really popular. People like the idea of getting a workout, and I think that's more as sports. And there's nothing wrong with sport. Sport is fantastic, but sport is not Budo, and there's a big, big
Mm,
difference. Budo is something, as Master Jean-Jacques Machado says, Budo, like Jiu-Jitsu is something he is, not something he does. So it's part of your life. It permeates everything. Whereas sport is, the whistle finishes, that's it. Forget about it for a week. Not saying that that's not important, but I think while we can live Budo, while it gives us something valuable, it will never die. So it's not quite dead yet. I think that
yeah.
I love the title of your of your podcast, but I think it's still live and well. But we do need to adapt to modern day times, and I think
Mm.
this is the challenge that we're all facing.
Yep, yeah. But the name is a provocation, obviously, and we want to do that. And you started touching. You brought the conversation now with what was really the core of the podcast, which is talking about um, what is the real role of Budo in modern society. Obviously, each country will be different. That's why I wanted to touch about the cultural differences. Like I live in Australia. I was training there,
Yes.
and moving from Japan to Australia was a shock. For the just the size of the people I was training with was
Yeah.
totally different. and like former rugby players will come to train with us. I was doing BJJ also, and like rough people will come. Well, and some of them, their intention was, I don't know if it was fighting, but definitely the practicality side of martial arts was very important. And in many countries, probably outside of Japan, maybe Singapore, where are safe countries, and self-defense is not really a thing that motivates people to start practicing martial arts.
Yes.
That might change a little bit the way you need to teach and the way you need to learn. And I know that you practice also other grappling arts in your school. You have BJJ. You practice other combat arts. And how do you balance the mindset between? To me, the mindset is different
Yes.
and I also have practiced both. And me recently this year I stopped doing BJJ. I did I think that the typical thing of the blue belt, quitting. Everyone expects to quit, but in my case, I want to think it was different because it was a decision, not
Yes.
because I was getting bored, like,
Yes.
where is this going? Because
They call it
it's
the
fighting.
blue belt blues.
But for me, it was always comparing to other things, not even with judo, which also I practice. Which in judo you can go if the physical part um, bores
Yeah.
you, or kind of feels that is not going somewhere. You have the other part, but in at least for me, BJJ wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
uh, how do you balance this? Like, you see it differently
Yeah.
from the mindset of the traditional martial arts to the intensity and especially the practicality
It's
of modern fighting arts.
what you've just described is it's a shock it's a cultural shock, and for me it was a reverse cultural shock, coming back, especially, I mean, Australia to Japan and then going back to Australia. I mean, lucky I came back to the Aikido Shihan, which is a full-time Yoshinkan dojo, so the spirit was still alive. It was like being in Japan, but doing other arts, going into BJJ in the mid 2007, 2008 in Australia was like Fight Club,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was not, there was nothing that resembled a dojo. It was like it was a gym, basically. It was like a Fight
Mm.
Club gym, and I've seen the evolution of those places now in Singapore, like, where if you don't get, these places are charging $400-500 month. You don't need a gi. They give you a gi. You have a shower. There's beautiful soaps. It's like this
Yeah.
beautiful country club, and it's very sanitized. It's very uh, it's not rough and tumble. So it's become something that's was, I guess, that fighters and other like other strikers or other martial artists really wanted to learn. After being influenced by UFC and the Gracies and the Machados, it's really changed how the evolution, and that's what I wanted to touch on. I'll get back to your question, but the evolution of arts, and that's why
Yeah.
things change. So Daito Ryu, Aikido Jiu-Jitsu, Aikido. Traditional Jiu-Jitsu became Judo, uh, and then branches of BJJ. And you've seen in 15 years or 20 years you've been doing BJJ, the evolution of BJJ from no-gi to the leg lock game. I mean, it's very hard to keep up with evolution. And I think that's a good thing. It's meant, if things are stagnant, then they do die. So evolution in the martial arts has always been a thing. So I think that's really, really important to remember. Um, how my experience is primarily Aikido. I would say I'm an Aikidoist with a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu, but the good thing about Aikido, and people don't realize it, is that it can be dialed up and down. So it can be done as a gentle, peaceful art, or it can be done as a very effective method of combat. From working on doors, from being a bouncer in Australia, we've had the opportunity to utilize it in real world situations, and you know, it doesn't maybe finish with a nice zanshin or something, but the zanshin is something that is mental rather than a physical manifestation. But I think it comes back to who you're teaching and why you're doing it. So in Japan, the Yoshinkan, while we trained hard, being effective in combat was down here in
Mm.
reasons why people trained. And as you alluded to, and people don't go to a dojo to do self-defense. It's just not done in Japan. It's done for the sake of the art. And the arts are beautiful. And I think there's always going to be room for that, regardless of how popular MMA get. You can't train MMA or BJJ with that intensity until you're 60 or 70. You simply can't do it. You have a lot of problems with shoulders, with joints, arms, people yanking things on. It's a very full on martial art. And the attrition rate is high. People drop out because why am I doing this? Whereas Aikido can be dialed back and it can be gentle, which I think is part of its appeal. Tai Chi, karate, some of these arts can really be practiced full on, or you can dial it back. And I think that's the strength of the traditional arts as well.
Yeah, you're right. I think as you say, the evolution of martial arts recently, I guess, since the UFC, the first UFC, things changed so much, and there's another thing that has changed a lot, which is communication, which is social media,
For sure.
and now the influence of all of these. And before we started recording, we were talking about how things are changing, how things are not just in martial arts. Obviously, the last 5 years have been crazy around
Yes.
the world. We are still every day, every week seems like a different world.
Yes.
And a lot of that is due this, the mobile phone, the social media, and how we are changing. Just this morning, I went to my daughter's school for a conversation with an expert on
Phone use.
on education and social media with kids, and how they are totally learning in a totally different way of the way we learn, and that has gone into the martial arts world also, like the
Yeah.
way we consume. I'm sure you and me, we used to look books or magazines. My collection of black belt magazines, or
Yes.
in Australia, I think is Blitz, right?
Yes.
That would be the version, Australian Aussie version of black belt.
Mhm.
I had issues and issues of black belt, but now you have social media, right?
Yes.
And if you cannot explain what your art is in 5 seconds video, nobody's following.
Yes.
How do you see these affecting, or maybe it's not just affecting, maybe it's contributing to the future of martial arts, to the traditional martial arts?
Yeah. I think, it's a complicated, it's a busy world, but I think, I think that's the strength of the traditional martial arts, in that in a chaotic world, things are unpredictable. Going to a dojo is almost like it's the cure for that insanity. So while we're there, we can be centered, we can be disciplined, and the thing that we need to remember is um, Budo builds resilience. And you need to, growth can only happen being uncomfortable. And that's the problem that we're facing now, is that we're too comfortable in life. We we have information at our fingertips, whereas in the old days, we'd be looking at, an edition of Black Belt or Blitz comes out, and it's just like, wow, this is so amazing. Whereas now it's just like, if your attention isn't, as you mentioned, first two seconds, you've lost them. And I find that this is a real challenge, but I think there's also a pushback. People are not satisfied with that, and it's creating a lot of anxiety and angst, especially in our young people. And I think that's where we need to come in, and where traditional, not just martial arts, I mean, not just traditional, but all martial arts, I think that's the remedy for that. Um, One thing that, this is kind of a little bit of a different direction, but Budo has always been about respect and etiquette to yourself and also to your partner. So, there's an old expression in Japanese that says, Budo begins and ends with a bow. And so since the UFC and since MMA, it's all about dissing your opponent, it's all about being arrogant, being loud, bragging. And that's the opposite. That's the antithesis of what Budo is about. So I think that, some people want to do that, and that's fine, but I think that it will come back around again. And I think it slowly is, but I live in hope that it is. But how to portray Aikido, again, this is a massive problem, because there are a lot of, I'm only speaking from an Aikido point of view, but there are a lot of people out there doing a great disservice to Aikido. This no throw stuff, ukes or the partners jumping around. It's to make the teacher looks good. It's a big problem. So
Yeah.
it begins with us. And I think rather than whinging about the problem, we have to do something about the solution. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what you're trying to do. And it's basically giving people an alternative variation or alternative information. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I think the martial arts is not a monolith, and the you have the door, the path,
Yes.
and it can takes people to different destinations. It's the same path, and if some people are interested in combat, some people are interested in self defense or in fitness, like you said,
Mm.
or I don't know, just to be fit, or they can do karate on Tuesdays and aerobics on Wednesdays. It's fine, like until you go through a process like Senshusei or
Mm.
going to a Honbu Dojo in Japan, and you see that is beyond just a physical activity that means something deeper, which obviously is very different and very difficult to transmit
Yeah.
outside of Japan.
Yeah. Mm.
And I think that's one of the big challenges that martial arts, something profound, and like you said, quite rightfully, is not just martial arts, and many of the traditional ways that we saw in the past, education, politics, culture, are being challenged by not always positive new options, maybe,
Yes. Yeah.
but that's part of the change. I'm sure our parents saw us doing certain things, and they just thought that we were just
Like in our
young
day, things
rebels.
are different. Yeah.
Yeah, and these young people don't know, and we are doing the same, and probably the next generations will be doing exactly the same. And this takes me to, so you mentioned you started training when you were 10.
Yes. I started judo when I was 9, actually. So I did judo for a couple of years and judo and aikido at the same time. And then I just did did aikido. Yeah.
All right. So imagine you can do it with yourself, or you maybe is different, but let's say a 10-year-old, 15-year-old right now, how you will invite them to go towards a more traditional, maybe a slow looking, maybe not as flashy. Definitely their Instagram is not going to look, or TikTok is not going to
Yeah.
look as cool if they're doing a traditional martial art rather than something with a cool uniform full of patches, and I can do this flashy, and everyone knows grappling, or they know
Yes.
ground and pound, right? But nobody really cares about who all sensei was.
Yes. Yeah.
How will you convince, not convince, or how you will attract a 15-10-year-old John that
Yeah.
is trying to start martial arts?
Yeah, I guess it goes back in our day. We didn't have a lot of choice. There wasn't much to do. You played in Australia. It was like maybe in summer you would play cricket. In winter you played footy, Australian rules, or rugby, depending on where you're from. But martial arts was so like, I mean, judo and karate were around, but aikido was the only reason I was introduced to aikido was because it was about 2 kilometers up the road from my house. And it was just like stepping into this amazing world that I'd never, this amazing culture that I was welcomed into. And so for me, I think it was just the perfect storm. But I stayed interested because I just thought it was so fascinating. I managed to travel to Asia, to Malaysia when I was 11, and that really changed the trajectory of my life. But you're right. I mean, now, we don't talk about with the younger generation, we have to make it interesting for them. So as long as I think Aikido can be, and Aikido and grappling together is can be very dynamic and fun, but they don't, we make them sweat, and I wouldn't say suffer, but they're having fun with a smile on their face. So there is discipline, but I guess at that age, we really want to get, for them to develop a love for it or an interest. Oh, excuse me. And then after we can, push them in a direction that they need to go. But I think it's kind of leading by example and inspiring them. I think that's all we can do, really.
Yeah. And I think one of the, and we have to say it, one of the problems, even if you want to call them obstacles, is a tradition can be an obstacle sometimes. Tradition can get on the way. And some of our teachers, and we were talking again before starting recording, that if for us that we are not there yet, we are not that old, we are not the young ones, is difficult to keep up with the changes. Now our masters, that we are still lucky to have them around us, and every time I have the chance to work and train with one of these great grandmasters, I feel like, oh my god, I need to make the most of this time, because I don't know for how long they're going to be around. And I know they are stubborn, and I know they are uh, uh, attached to these old ways, because that was there from a different generation, and that's the way they learn. And I remember, obviously we're not going to name names, but I how many times I tried to change the whole website of one of our sensei, and try to make a little bit of marketing for the dojo. And they were like, no, it's okay, nobody really looks at internet. And I was like, what? Like, you need to do it. And obviously now the dojo is struggling, and still from time to time I try to help, but
Yes.
that's the way it is. But sometimes, and one of the premises of this podcast is like, we are not here to pretend that the old ways were better.
No.
It's not about nostalgia. This is not about that. This is, we need to do something now if we don't want to lose something that is so with so much value. And maybe tradition sometimes get on the way. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I think we have to, we're very respectful for our teachers and what they taught us. And it can be arrogant for the next generation to pretend that we have all the answers and we discard what we've learned. And I know that's not what we're saying. I think basically, we want to preserve those timeless values: respect, gratitude, humility, stripping back the ego. These are timeless things that we need to preserve, but we have to look at different ways of presenting it to the student. So I see some dojos outside Japan that are more strict and Japanese than in Japan. And I think that what we need to realize is that the dojo is not a throne for the teacher to sit at and pontificate from, or follow me like a guru. The idea of Budo is to give you something inside you that enhances your life. If you're not enhancing your character, enhancing everything permeating into your life, then why bother? You're not there to suffer for no reason. In this suffering and discomfort brings growth, and that growth has to be a growth mindset. So I think for teachers in particular, we need to nourish our students and cultivate them, not to be clones of ourselves, but to allow them to, it's like giving them a gift and then they need to pass it on. And that's how it's always passed along. I feel like we talk about martial arts stripping the ego, but sometimes the higher we get, the more Dan ranks we achieve and acquire, that the opposite can happen. So I think we always have to have the white belt mentality, that we're always learning. And I always, I say to high ranking teachers that you need to go and do another martial arts, high on a white belt, and see what it's like to be a beginner again. Because sometimes, if you've been a black belt for 20, 30 years, you think that that's all there is. And absolutely, it's a very, very small world that we live in. We need to experience other things. And by doing that, you become a better teacher, you become a better student, and it's only going to be for the best. But a lot of people will stand behind something and they don't want to be found out for not knowing something. And it's, I make many mistakes, and I think we when we learn martial arts, we fail our way to success, or we fail our way to getting better, because Kemi, you need to get thrown to get back up again, and you just got to keep getting up, and you need to show up. And that's that, in a nutshell, that is how you get better. I don't know if I've gone off track, but
No.
I think we need to respect our, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. It's an old expression that's used a lot, but it's very, very true. And at the same time, we don't want to drown the man that taught us how to swim. We're not stepping on their head, but we need to also think of new, innovative ways of presenting this information by being respectful to tradition, but being innovative as well. And I would like to say, like, the top instructors in the Yoshinkan are all in their 60s and 70s, which is great. but we need some top guns. We should be seeing people in their late 20s, 30s, and forward 40s who are just have got technical mastery and are going out and blazing their own path. For the older generation, and I guess we're kind of, as I said, we're at the middle, but I see my role more as an instructor and a mentor now. I want to maintain my technical ability, of course, but there should be other people that are stronger and coming out doing doing things for the art. And it's happening slowly, but I like to see more of it. And this is not knocking our revered teachers. This is actually honoring what they gave us and doing something and making it our own. Because if we don't make it our own, what are we doing? We're just doing we're doing exercise, have a few laughs along the way, but we really want to preserve this, and it's worth preserving, in my opinion.
That's exactly what I wanted to follow up with, because now looking forward with all this in mind, and not just for Aikido, in general, how do you foresee the future of traditional martial arts? I was working with this project called Budo before during the pandemic, and I had the chance to interview many people around the world. Some of them I didn't know. It was thanks to social media that I connected with them. Everyone was stranded, everyone was at home, and we share so many similar things. It was not Aikido, and I remember one conversation I had with a Kendo teacher, and he was saying, like, for him, maybe quite pessimistic, like most of us, we were around that time. He said that he had very little confidence on the future of traditional martial arts. Like you were saying, 100% dedicated people to a traditional dojo. Because it was very difficult to run and to eat from a traditional dojo. How do you see what is the future? Do you think traditional martial arts, traditional dojos can survive? They definitely need to evolve, or I know that the title is quite pessimistic, or are they dead?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally Budo is always kind of how do you say, rejects commercialization, and I think that's buying belts or collecting certificates. This is the new age, and for me, and for you, and for people of our generation, it's something that for me it's unfathomable. Like, to be a sixth or seventh dan and not being able to do okemi, or being so out of shape. It's got now to, like, basically, if you don't die, you are going to reach a certain level. And so I'm coming around to your answer, but I feel it's difficult, because even in our own different organizations, if you don't give me a six dan, if Carlos Sensei doesn't give me a six dan, then I'm going to go and train with this guy who's going to give me a six dan. And for me, it's like, it's losing its integrity. And I find that hard to accept. So that's happening regardless of whether I like it or whether we like it or not. I just feel that the traditional dojos are probably, it depends on the teacher, of course. I think it's becoming a lot harder, and they do perhaps need to adapt. So I don't know what that adaptation is yet, because we're still experiencing ourselves, but it's a difficult question, and one, I guess, it's hard to answer, and it's hard to face as well. But we have seen certainly a decline of relevancy. So I guess if we think about how to address that, is that we need to become more relevant again. How do we do that? Yes, social media. We need to present our art in the very best way, but we also have to maybe not look at it just from it's not a fighting point of view or a self-defense point of view. Look at the character, look at the benefit it gives you in life. In a chaotic world, it's like a compass. It points you north. When everything's going crazy, you have the dojo, you have a space. And that's not just a dojo. People go to church, they go to the mosque. It's part of their life, where not equating Budo to religion, but it is something that definitely gives people a sense of purpose and a sense of themselves. And I think that is very important in everyday life, because the more things that go crazy, we need to be able to have that compass. So I'm an optimist. So I live in hope. And I think rather than just, you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. So we can debate about it for hours, but we need to do something about it. And that's why the fellowship, I guess, came about as well. This is a little bit different. We started it's essentially a Facebook group that grew into more of it's more of a movement rather than an organization, because there's no hierarchy, there's no, it's just a group of like-minded people that want to really preserve the teachings of the Yoshinkan's method of Aikido around the world. So I think it takes small steps, but one voice or isn't going to do it, but when we get together, we really can create, I wouldn't say noise, but we can create something special and unique. And I think that resonated and still resonates with people now.
Yeah, I think what you're doing, and we will include all the links to the information of all the work you're doing. I think it's super important. You answered the big question before, if Budo is dead or not, and it's great to end it up with a positive note, with an optimistic note. The title of the podcast might sound pessimistic, but like I said, it's just a provocation. Like we want to really know, like day by day, we try to survive with these changes that are happening around the world, and it's good to see this like motion. One of the things that we learn from martial arts is balance and motion. Like you need to be balanced. You cannot have more of this and less of that. You really need to strive to have balance. And if you stay, yes.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add exactly to what you're saying? Sorry to interrupt. One thing just to continue is the connection. And the connection, we talk about it in martial arts, connection between your partner, connection in your technique. But more important in this world that we live in now is we need a connection with other people. And Aikido and the fellowship and Budo is something that brings people together in unity under a common cause. And that connection, for me, is what Budo is all about. It's, we've known each other for 28 years. We've had great nights. We've had great training experiences. We can not see each other for 2 years. And then it's like, hey, come on, we can pick up where we left off. And for me, that connection that we're always going to have is priceless. And as the world changes and gets more uncertain, we need that connection more than anything in the world now.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of finishing this conversation. We need to be a little bit more optimistic. Things might look sober and not very good around the world, but if you really see and compare to the past, we are living in a really safe world. There is less wars. I know that it sounds absurd to even talk about that when you see the news, but we live more. There's less diseases around, and we need to be positive. And I think most of the people who practice martial arts have been practicing martial arts. I try to make the analogy of martial arts as a great medicine that works for you, and you spend your life trying to suggest to other people, hey, this one works perfectly for me, and you should try it too, right? Like a tea or like a potion that is great for your body and for your mind. It's a unique potion. Sensei, thank you very much. I think I don't have to tell you the honor that is for me to have you here. And it was a great conversation. I hope I can see you soon. Obviously, I love this, what you say is about connection, and I'm looking forward to being thrown around in the tatami by you.
Vice versa. Thank you so much. I love the work.
I have the chance. Thank you very much, Sensei. And for everyone listening, thank you very much. If you really enjoyed this, we are not about the numbers. We are not about the likes. It's more about building a community, exactly like Jon Sensei said. It's about connection. But if you like this content, please like, subscribe, and share it. That's very important, because we can reach other people who might share the same idea, and we believe that Budo is not dead. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sensei.
Thank you very much.
Budo Is Dead is a podcast produced by Yoshin Project, hosted by Carlos Tama for Yoshin Project. If this conversation matters to you, like, subscribe, and share. It helps us reach others who still care.